Good afternoon. I just thought today I would take a video of just all of the beautiful things that I see around me on this fantastically, incredibly beautiful fall day. I try to make it in my yard where I always have something to eat as many months as I possibly can manage to do that. Right here we have some goji berries, and they're very, very good, very delicious, and extremely nutritious. That's something I haven't really talked a lot about yet, about the incredible nutrition of figs. And I want one day to dedicate an entire video to that subject and maybe bring in some of the history of figs. It's little known that the Roman army that did conquer the world and maintained civilization for 1,000 years, good or bad, not always good, not always bad, but that they did so making figs the main staple of their diet on their conquests, during their conquests. And probably they wouldn't have succeeded as well as they did if it hadn't been for figs. Figs in those days were sort of like the bread of today. Oh, look at that bee there. Look at it. Even in this late date, around the 20th or so of October, there's a bee there feeding on a goji berry. That's unusual. But goji berries are delightful. I really, really enjoy them. And it's a plant that will fruit for months and months and months. As you can see, here it is around the 20th of October or so. And there's plenty of goji berries. I've got more plants, as you can see. So the whole idea is to have organic fruits and berries spread over as long a season as you can possibly manage, starting with the strawberries, which I have several patches, and then going over to the blueberries, which I have several patches and produce a huge amount, a very large harvest of berries for a long period of time. I have a blueberry video that, if you are interested, it says not figs, but I love my blueberries is the title, I believe, and it will show you that patch I just showed you when it's full of fruit. So if you're curious, that's a good video to watch. And blueberries, of course, are the source of tremendous amounts of antioxidants, very, very nutritious berry, and I highly, highly recommend all of the berries, really, but I particularly love my blueberries. I love them all. I really shouldn't pick out any one of them as being my favorite. Also today, I just wanted to kind of show off my persimmons. You can tell from watching my other videos that persimmons is one of my favorite fruits in the whole world. And it truly is. It's an amazing fruit. And just look how abundant this tree is and how spectacular they look. Look at them all. And so when I encourage my fig friends out there and organic grower friends, when I encourage them and suggest that you plant a few persimmons trees in your yard, can you see why? Look at this. Isn't this marvelous? It's spectacular. I mean, there's few words that I can use to describe this tree, how prolific it is, how productive it is. And while none of these are fully ripe, I see two up there that are just a day or two away from being ripe. And they will start, as they do every year, to ripen, and all the figs will be gone. The figs will be over with. Look at all those fruits in there. Look at that. It's just amazing, isn't it? And don't you want one of these in your yard? And you can have one. Just look for a Nikita's Gift. Nikita's Gift is the name of this fig. And I highly, highly recommend it, as I have on several of my videos, because I want you to enjoy the splendor, the extravagance, and the incredible degree of satisfaction that I derive from growing this wonderful fruit. It's spectacular. It's superb. And so I wanted to show it on this beautiful fall day. And that's another reason why I made this video today. But it's such a lovely day. My persimmons trees, most of them, are finished now. Of these other varieties, that huge tree there, which is probably about 25 years old and about 30 feet tall. I don't think it has any more fruit on it. And I've eaten them, and they fall into the ground. This American variety does that. They get ripe, and you don't want to eat them before that, and they fall. And then they're not astringent. They're just perfect. It's really wonderful because it falls into the grass. I've got thick grass here, and I let it grow while they're falling down on the grass. And I just come down every day and pick them up and eat them, bring them in the house. Debbie and I will put them aside in a little bowl and always have fresh persimmons. But these American persimmons are a little earlier than the Japanese, or in the case of Nikita's Gift that I just featured, that's a hybrid. It's actually a cross between Japanese and American. One of only two in the whole world that I know of so far, unless it was successfully accomplished recently. But for many, many years, probably 15 or 20, there were only two successful hybrids between an American persimmons and a Japanese persimmons, and the one I just featured is one of them. These are my pawpaw trees that I've talked about before, and some more persimmons trees. All done. It's all over. And if I walk over here, my figs are pretty much finished. Pretty soon I'll be digging up some of these that are in containers and storing them away. Here and there's a fruit or two that may still get ripe, since it's not the end of October yet, and they're calling for a warm week. Is what my wife told me, that the coming week is supposed to be fairly decent, good weather. So it's nice to have a straggler here and there to get ripe. But for the most part, I realize, and I have to face the facts about the summer being over as far as figs are concerned. And that's okay, because I had a good season and I enjoyed myself. I tried to share my experiences with you wherever I could, and most of them were good. I had a hard time for a while with the leftover hurricanes and a lot of rain, which spoiled a lot of my figs. But I managed, because of the varieties that I grew, I managed to pick quite a few delicious fruits during even those periods. So all is well that ends well. And I look back and view the entire season. I try to collectively, and I'm satisfied. I'm very, very satisfied. Here's that tree again. Isn't it marvelous? It's just amazing, isn't it? And I've got another tree like this too in the yard, of the same variety. And that's what's nice too, you know, about doing these things, you know, like growing. And I try even to stagger my, as I've mentioned before, I even stagger my figs. I get some that are early. I get them started early. They're early varieties, and others I start later. I get them out of storage at different times. And the whole purpose of that is that I want figs spread out from the earliest conceivable time that I can manage to get them to come to fruition to the very, very latest, I mean absolute latest time. I just ate a couple figs in here, but I've still got some black Madeira, just a few left, and they're ripening very nicely. I just, before I did this video, ate a few, and I seem to be in a habit of that, and then I come up with a big idea that, hey, why did I do that? You know, it would have been nice to feature a few more black Madeiras for the season. That one's ripe. That one there is ripe. I can pop it off. I'm gonna take a bite out of this. Black Madeira. This one's Figo Preto. Let's see, where's that? Okay. And there's more black Madeira here getting ripe. Well, let's take a bite out of this Figo Preto. Wow. They never cease to amaze me. One of the finest figs in the world, no question. No question about it. It's prolific. It doesn't spoil easily. You can make it early enough, as I've shown and demonstrated in my videos. It's absolutely superb in terms of flavor and quality. There's just very little that you can say that's bad about black Madeira. The only drawback in black Madeira is it tends to be a little late, but it's not as late as many, many other figs. And it produces an abundance of figs. It's so productive. It's hardy too. I mean, what I mean by hardy, not winter hardy. I mean, it's just a tough fig, a very vigorous fig. You know, it's just a high quality, superior cultivar. It's of the late varieties, or I shouldn't say even that, of the pots that I'm forced to grow in containers in my 7A climate. It is top notch. Okay, there's probably 4 fig varieties that I would probably recommend for pot growing in my zone. Let me devour the rest of this. The taste of that. It's so fun. It's so exquisite. It's so delicious. Here I've got some Italian 258s. And I ate a couple of those this morning. I eat a couple every day, and there's only a few left now. Very few. Those aren't quite ripe yet. This one has, well, this one here's ripe. Wow. This is an Italian 258. Let me take a bite of this. These are so good. This one I'm going to break in half and give this other half to Debbie, because she loves Italian 258 and black Madeira and all of the figs, really. Let's see. Wow. I just wish I could share this taste with you. It's just a wonderful. Let me get back to my, and I'll make it brief. I haven't done this. I resist the temptation to do it. But I'm actually going to pick out 4 figs that I grow in containers that perhaps I recommend more than any others. And so, for what it's worth, and I often put that caveat in my videos, my opinion, my top 4 figs, I think, and there are other beautiful ones that come right after, so I don't want to discourage you from trying those, which we will talk about another time, but I just want to make it simplistic. Italian 258, Black Madeira, Smith, and Ronde Bordeaux. Those 4 container figs have provided me with the most personal satisfaction and contentment, and have impressed me more than any other fig cultivars I've ever grown. And trust me when I tell you, I've grown a lot of cultivars. If I was going to make a recommendation, which I just did, of 4 of the top figs to grow in containers, I just did make them. Ronde Bordeaux, Smith, Black Madeira, and also Italian 258. If you just grew those and gave them an early start, and Ronde Bordeaux is a wonderful early fig too, very early. So the varieties that I gave you are kind of spread out. You've got an early variety, which is Ronde Bordeaux, and then you've got a mid-season variety, which is Smith, and then you have 2 late varieties. And I think Italian 258 is just a little later, actually, than Black Madeira. But all of them, as you can see, I ripen them all. And I give them an early start with shuffling, and I've got videos that cover that too. But those 4 varieties, I personally find indispensable. Completely, totally, absolutely indispensable. I would never, ever, ever give them up. None of them. Now, there's other good varieties, and I don't want to discourage you or even to suggest that there aren't. There are other good varieties. It's so difficult to narrow it down, but I want to make it simplistic so that, especially people just starting out, it's easier for them to make plans to start their fig collection without too much confusion, too much noise. There's so much noise. You don't need all the noise, because remember, it's not just about even early and late. It's about early, mid-season, and late, but early, mid-season, and late, and having high qualities, good qualities, little splitting, little cracking, tasting good in a pot. Many varieties do not taste good in pots. They just don't. The 4 that I just told you, they are excellent. They taste excellent in pots. Yeah, they'll be better in the ground, but we don't live in California. I don't. I live in New Jersey. So forget about that, okay? And I even found that Ronde Bordeaux is better in a pot than it is in the ground. It just doesn't perform for me as well in the ground as it does in a pot. And it performs magnificently in a pot. Yeah, if I sound a little excited, a little hyper, I am, because I really want to convey to you my enthusiasm for those 4 varieties. And yeah, I don't think you have to go any further than that, but you will someday probably, but you don't have to. Not in my experience. You don't have to. And so now let's quickly talk about 4 other varieties. Varieties that I would recommend in ground for 7A. If you live in a crappy climate like I do. And I want to make it simple. The first variety that I would recommend, for what it's worth, and I want to make that clear, it's my personal opinion, and it may not jive with someone else's, but from my experience, the number 1 in-ground fig tree that I would plant before all other fig trees in the ground, period, is Celeste. Because it's the most valuable. This is not Celeste. This is going to be a recommendation. This is a Mount Etna type, a hardy Chicago type, which of course will be in my list of 4. Here's that other fig, incidentally. I mean, other persimmons tree that I mentioned to you a little while ago that I said I had another one in the yard, and here it is. Look at it. Wow. How wonderfully spectacular. I love it. Just laden with fruit. Everywhere. All over the place. I absolutely love my persimmons. And there's more. There's a big tree there that's 25 foot tall at least. And that's my Seijo. And here I've got some grafted persimmons that I've got all tied up because they're heavy. And I produced more. I plucked them off, but I couldn't resist to let a few more grow. But let's get back to my subject about the 4 in-ground fig varieties that I recommend. Oh, let's put these in the video. Why not? I still have some wonderful eggplants. Look at that. Isn't that a beauty? Okay. And then I've got these Oriental type eggplants here, and Debbie's going to fry them up and prepare them in our favorite way soon. She told me to pick these today and bring them in. Aren't they weird looking? Look at that. Okay, well, enough of that. Another blueberry. Can't wait till next year already. Let's take a walk over here and look at the Celeste. Look at that, Seijo. Can't wait. My Celeste, and I've got it featured in several videos, is my, I would say in-ground is my most valuable fig tree because it is so reliable. It gets ripe in August when it's hot and dry, and the fruits are just so exquisitely delicious. And I don't care what anybody says about Celeste, it's the most underrated fig in the world. Okay, it's a great fig, and there's different strains, so that's something to look into, and I have several strains. But even just plain ordinary Celeste is one of the top cultivars to grow in the ground because you want a no-nonsense fig. You want a fig that's going to produce fruit every year and plus it's the most hardy fig, winter hardy fig in my collection, period. Okay, there's only 1 or 2 that comes close to it. Okay, and one of them I wouldn't recommend to even grow. So, as far as I'm concerned, of all the trees that I've ever grown that are worthy and of merit, the Celeste is the very best. Brunswick is almost a tie, but Brunswick splits in this climate. Whenever it rains, it's just horrible. It spoils. It's just not a good cultivar to grow, especially in ground. And I don't like it in containers either. Okay, so I don't recommend Brunswick. So Celeste is the number 1. It's the most underrated fig and shouldn't be, because it's just so vigorous and healthy and early and productive, and it is delicious. And even though they tried to take the Celeste fig and they tried to make better figs in the breeding program by O'Rourke, Professor O'Rourke, I don't really think personally, and I've tried a lot of those crosses, I honestly don't think they ever replicated a better fig than Celeste. I don't. I just do not think so. It's just an incredible variety. And there's blue Celeste, there's black Celeste, there's Chincoteague Celeste. I mean, one that I know about, which is a larger version of the same variety. And these are all sports of one another or variations over time. And you find one you like and you grow it if you live in my zone. The second one I would recommend would be a hardy Chicago type, a Mount Etna type of your choice, but to make it simple, honestly, and to make it easy and inexpensive for you to obtain one, one that's reliable and good, and I think a little bit sweeter than Hardy Chicago, and they're all about the same. There's 60 of them. Some people say 90 of them. These 90 varieties, 60 varieties that are all essentially the same fig with very minor variations, and that's all true, okay? But there's a few that have been singled out that are just a little bit sweeter, or a little bit more this or a little bit more that, maybe slightly more early, that sort of thing. And of all of them, honestly, to make it simple, to make it easy for you, Malta Black would be probably my first recommendation. Now, some people would disagree with that, but honestly, you can't go wrong with Malta Black. Malta Black is superb in every way that I can tell you about. It's superb. Malta Black. And you can get it inexpensively, and a lot of good growers will provide it to you. Make sure you deal with good growers, reliable growers, and there's quite a few out there that are good and reliable. And I would go with Malta Black. This is not Malta Black, by the way. This is my third recommendation, which is Peter's Honey. Now, I've had Peter's Honey in the ground in this spot for 26 years now. And I have eaten hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fruits. And I don't know any other grower, honestly, that has Peter's Honey in the ground. I know they grow in containers, which I have not recommended. I do not like the taste of Peter's Honey in containers. As I said, some figs are good in containers. Some figs don't taste good in containers. And Peter's Honey is not one that does taste good in containers. But in ground, it's superb. And it is a very vigorous cultivar, very healthy. It's exquisite in almost every way. It's just a superior fig tree. And I recommend it in ground. You may have to cover it in 7A or 7B. And if your trees are valuable to you, as my trees are valuable to me, it's not too difficult. And I have videos in my collection that you can look at on how to cover a tree. But if you want to have an abundance of delicious fruits, figs in the summertime, I can't think of a stronger, more healthy, more vigorous, more productive. It's very difficult, besides Celeste, to come up with anything better than Peter's Honey and Malta Black, as I suggested to you. Malta Black being a Mount Etna type, Hardy Chicago type. This is Malta Black, right here. Even have one ripe fig on it. Well, let's take a bite of that. Delicious. So I would grow those varieties. I would grow Celeste. I would grow Malta Black or a Mount Etna of your choice. And I would grow Peter's Honey. And those fig varieties give me the greatest satisfaction, those three. Now I'm thinking of a fourth, and I just might want to hold back on the fourth for now, because I'm very reluctant to recommend fig trees and put them out in front of others. I don't like doing it. I really don't like doing it. You've noticed I've shied away from that. I don't like comparing too much. But at some point, you've got to make choices. And, I could say that I like improved Celeste, which is different than Celeste. It's a cross between Celeste, as being the parent, and another fig tree. And I like improved Celeste. I really do, for a lot of different reasons. And that might be the fourth that I would recommend. You certainly couldn't go wrong with it. But when I look at some other fig varieties I've got Sultane. I've got quite a few different varieties that I could say, well, maybe that would be the fourth recommendation that I make. So there's also another one that's an early fig, which I really like, which is Desert King. which is a San Pedro fig tree, which means that it only produces fruits in the spring and summer, on last year's wood. So it's very unique. And you know about San Pedros, most of you by now, I hope. And if you want a very, very early fig and a cultivar that produces an abundance of figs, I wouldn't mind recommending as my 4th in-ground variety, I wouldn't mind recommending that. Because who doesn't want early figs, especially exquisitely delicious figs like Desert King? And the problem with it, though, in the wintertime, you have to cover it because those breba, and that's what you're going to get in the spring, and then develop in midsummer around July 4th, those breba won't survive if you don't cover them in the wintertime. Okay? And there's a couple other varieties that I really like that I wouldn't mind sticking in that 4th position. So I think that's all I really want to recommend for now. And it gives you a general idea, especially if you're just starting out. If you stick to those varieties I just mentioned, you will not be dissatisfied. I promise you, you won't. Let's walk through here. And this video's longer than I had hoped it would be. So it's time for me to say goodbye. It's a little sad this time of year when I look at all my fig trees and I realize it's coming to an end, a screeching halt actually, very soon. Yeah, there's a few stragglers here and there, like with this Hardy Chicago type, but there's not many left. It's pretty much all finished. The season's over. So I think I'll be saying goodbye. Thanks for visiting. I always enjoy when you do. I hope you pick up some pointers from some of the things I share with you. As far as the in-ground varieties, just remember that if you use the ground bag method, my ground bag method that I've talked about many times, you can get incredible results even from certain varieties that wouldn't necessarily do well in ground in your area if it weren't for the fact that you have them in containers and then you're burying them in the ground fully after you've given them an early start. So this gives you a lot more flexibility.